I was 15, maybe 16 when this happened. Summer break had just started. During daytime, after Dad went to work, I was usually home with Mom and my brother Johnny. I didn't drive yet, and Johnny was too young, so Mom would drop us off to the private lessons we each took for the summer. I was home alone that day. Mom went out to pick up Johnny from his lesson. I didn't have much to do, so I was on my phone listening to some music. Someone rang the doorbell. It hasn't been that long since we moved to the area, and we didn't know the neighbors too well. Friends visiting would usually call first, so I figured it was some religious people doing missionary work or some kind of salesperson. I didn't want to deal with either of them, so I just stayed in my room listening to music. It wasn't too long until the doorbell rang again. Whoever it was, I guess they knew someone was home from the loud music playing in my room. Suddenly the doorbell began ringing over and over again. I got scared, so I turned the music off and stayed quiet. I wanted to see who was doing this, but there's no peeking hole on the front door, and I was afraid of the strangers seeing me if I peeked through the window curtain. My room was too close to the door. A man's voice, a bit higher than normal, came from outside. "I can hear you." I got goosebumps. I thought about running back out the backyard. No good. This man would probably hear the back door open and catch me. I wondered if I should call the police for a moment, but this man didn't do anything besides ringing the doorbell. It's not much for the police to go on about, and I'd probably get in trouble with my parents for making a big fuss over nothing. Then he started whistling. It was a song I've never heard before, a soft, somehow creepy tune. He was really good though. It was probably the best whistling I heard from anyone. He stayed at the door until Mom and Johnny came back home. I knew he was there the whole time because the whistling never stopped, and I was stuck in my room hiding away in the closet just in case. Mom and Johnny said they didn't see anybody at the door when they were coming in. I looked outside to see if there was anyone out there, but the only thing I noticed that was a bit unusual was a black car that was parked on the street across from our house. It was unusual because the driveway on that house was big enough for 3 cars, and people there usually parked on the driveway. In fact, most houses in the neighborhood had big driveways, so it was rare to see any cars parked on the street. The windows on the black car were heavily tinted, so I couldn't see if there was anyone in there. A month or so had passed. Dad was out working as usual, but Mom and Johnny were home. Someone rang the doorbell, and Mom sent me to open the door. As I got closer to the door, I could hear something I'd now forgotten about for some time. It was that whistling song from that stranger at the door. It all came back to me. I froze in place, just a few steps from the door. Johnny was getting ready to go out to see his friends. Mom, too, was on her way out for grocery shopping. I stopped both of them, told them that there was a weird man outside. I can still hear him whistling that creepy song. I peeked through the living room window and saw nothing at the door. Just that black car, parked on the street again. I finally decided to open the door, taking courage from the fact that Mom and Johnny were here with me. There was no one there. Even the whistling was gone. Fortunately, no creepy stranger ever came by again, but I'll probably never forget the whistling and that creepy voice saying, "I can hear you." I live in an apartment with a roommate. The neighboring apartment and the one I live in share a wall, and the doors are pretty much right next to each other. It's easy to confuse between sounds coming from the neighbor's door and the ones coming from mine. The clicking key and lock sounds, and the creaks from opening and closing, they all sound the same. I was sick one day, so I called off work and stayed home. I heard the clicks of the door lock, but figured it was the neighbors and paid no attention to it. It couldn't have been my roommate. It was way too early for her to be back yet. The clicking sound kept going for a while. I was annoyed, but the neighbors and I didn't exactly get along. I was sick. I didn't feel like having another argument. So I ended up just turning the TV up to drown out any other sounds. That evening, my roommate called. She was outside and needed me to open the door. I let her in and asked her if she forgot the apartment key this morning. She didn't. Her key just wouldn't go through the lock. I checked with mine and found that mine didn't work either. The lock was broken. We called a locksmith that night and found out that the lock was broken due to some metal that was jammed in there. The locksmith said someone probably tried to break in. Then I remembered the clicking sound coming from the neighbor's door earlier that day. I don't think it was the neighbors, or their door for that matter. I wonder what would have happened if that someone succeeded. It was a few years ago, winter in the middle of December. My parents were out for the weekend, so I was home alone. I was up late that night playing video games. I guess it was a little past 2, around 2:30 in the morning. I was getting tired, so I decided to finish up the game and get ready for bed. I was in the living room. The censored light in the front porch lit up. It's pretty sensitive, occasionally lighting up on stray cats or raccoons passing by, so I thought it was just that. But then, a moment later, the front door began rattling, as if someone was shaking it to open. We had someone try to break in the house before, so the entire door and locks were switched to brand new, extra sturdy stuff. I was a little scared being home alone and all, but the new door plus the home security system my parents also installed gave me some courage to speak up. "Who's there?" The rattling stopped momentarily, but started again, this time a bit more violently than before. I quickly checked all the windows to make sure everything was locked and secure. Then I shouted at the door, "Go away, or I'm gonna call the police." The door rattled for a few more seconds afterwards, then stopped. I waited for a bit to see if this person would try to do something again, but nothing happened. I decided not to call the police. Whoever it was, he was gone now, and I didn't want to have to file a police report this late at night. As I laid in bed, ready to go to sleep, something occurred to me that I hadn't noticed before. I didn't hear anything besides the door rattling. You see, there's a gravel path in front of our front door. It's one of those that makes lots of noise when someone steps over. It's impossible to avoid at least stepping over it a few times if you want to come to the front door. Even small animals make some noise when they pass by. I was in the living room the whole time. There is no way not to hear the gravel sound from the living room. I didn't hear someone coming or leaving. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because it was morning when I opened my eyes. I looked out the window through the blinds and saw nothing. That day, I came home around dinner time after hanging out with my friends. Mom and Dad had come back and was already having dinner, so I sat down on the table to join in. They were talking about our neighbor. It turns out the man next door had died last night. He was an older man, living alone after his wife passed away a few years back. It was unexpected though, because he was as healthy as one can be at that age, jogging every morning and always active. Cause of death was unknown. They say there wasn't any evidence of forced entry or violence either, so it really was a mystery. Sometimes I can't help but think that the rattling door that night had something to do with our neighbor's death. It's silly, I know, but the times that I do think about it, I have a hard time going to sleep. It's been over 10 years now since I had this experience. Mom and I lived in a 2-room condo. Her work required her to go on business trips pretty regularly, so I was occasionally home alone for a few days at a time. I was a high school senior, so I didn't mind having the whole place to myself. In fact, it was nice to be able to stay up late and do whatever I wanted to do. It was another night by myself. I was up late watching TV, basically a couch potato the whole time. I was getting sleepy and the couch was too comfortable, so I decided to sleep on it. I turned the TV off and left the remote on the coffee table. I'm a light sleeper, and the sound from the TV wakes me up easy. I fell asleep in no time, but something woke me up. It was the TV, still on and still playing that show I was watching earlier. I must have pressed the remote while I was sleeping. I turned it off again and closed my eyes. Just when I was about to fall asleep again, the TV turned back on. This time I knew it wasn't me, because my hands were on the couch the whole time. Thinking it was either the remote or the TV acting up, I pulled the power cord off the outlet and also the battery out of the remote. I laid back down on the couch again and closed my eyes, but couldn't fall asleep this time. It's hard to go back to sleep after being awoken in the middle of it, especially if that happened twice in a row. Did I mention that I'm also a light sleeper? I kept my eyes closed, trying to go back to sleep, but a different kind of noise began to bother me. It was coming from the TV. Not the sound of the TV show, but a clicking sound. I opened my eyes to take a look. I swear, something was in front of the TV. I don't know what it was, or if my eyes were playing a trick on me, but that shadowy something was crouched up in front of the TV. I freaked out and jumped off the couch ready to scream. As soon as I did though, the shadowy figure seemed to disappear into the thin air. I quickly turned on the light, but nothing was there. I thought it must have been my imagination, but the light revealed something that really gave me the chills. The plastic cover on the TV that houses all the manual buttons was open. It's always closed, since everyone just uses the remote. I realized that the clicking noise earlier wasn't my imagination, but the sound of the power button being pressed over and over again. That night, I stayed up until the sunrise next morning with every single lights in the house on.